Our champions, Cecile and Amy, although Amy has now moved on to Mozambique, who have our members who have experience of living there, will give us a snapshot. And as usual, I think the most important thing about our morning travels is that what this does, it gives the insight into what life is really like, something which you can never find in a guidebook. And so we do thank you for your participation and giving us that glimpse. And also it supports for our members the bank's decentralization agenda. As we move, as we are trying to encourage people to move, it helps them to get a sense of what life could be like for them and their families from other WBG families. So I will just ask Cecile and Amy to introduce themselves and kick off the session with, of course, the first question after the introduction is to paint a realistic picture of a day in the life of a family based in Madagascar. So over to you, Cecile and Amy.
Thanks, Yvonne. Amy, do you want me to start and then you can chime in? And yeah. Portia also? Okay. And if Portia's on the phone also, that would be great because she's the newer number. So hello everyone. My name is Cecile. I have been until very recently been living in Tana. So Yvonne, if you can't say Antananarivo, it's Tana. That's what everybody calls the capital in French and in English. So it's much easier.
I can do that, Tana.
Kat didn't say anything, so she wanted to make it more difficult for you, I guess. Anyway, so I lived in Madagascar until recently for 3 years. We moved because my husband is an energy specialist at the bank, and I was consulting in DC and continued consulting in Madagascar. Life in Tana is, I think, for families quite pleasant. It really depends on how old your kids are. I think for small kids until about their preteen years, it's quite nice. I think for teenagers, it's a bit more difficult because it's very difficult to move around by foot. It's actually impossible to move around by foot in Tana. There are no sidewalks. It's very polluted. And traffic is quite dense, so it's not recommended to walk by foot. So that means that you have to shuttle your kids from A to B. And if you don't live in a sort of secured residence, for example, where other kids live, then meeting up with your kids' friends is going to be difficult. And I think at that age, they like to sort of, be independent and not have mom and dad shuttle them around all the time. So I think that would be one sort of negative, aspect if you have teenage kids. In terms of schools, you have the French lycée, which has a pretty good reputation, and the American school, which also has a good reputation. So those are good options for English or French-speaking kids. A day in the life in Tana, I guess, is different for everyone, obviously. I worked mostly from home, so it was really nice to not have to deal with traffic. Traffic is very, very dense, and everybody has a chauffeur because traffic is so dense, and it's quite inexpensive to have a chauffeur. So we did a lot of work in the car also. We took a lot of phone calls and worked a lot in the car so that we would use that time to and from work to do that. So I think for my husband, who did the shuttling from school to work, from home to work and back every day, it was a bit more intense for him. But as I mentioned, if you use your time wisely, then you don't really you don't have the stress of driving in a traffic situation or anything like that. In terms of the population is Malagasys are very nice, very very welcoming people. They have more of an Asian attitude towards life, I would say, than an African attitude. It's an island, so it's got a lot of mix, a lot of influences from different regions, and Tana is in the highlands, so it's 1,300 meters high. It's in the middle of the island, so it's not close to the beach. A lot of people ask, whether we go to the beach every weekend. We don't go to the beach every weekend. We go to the beach like you go to the beach, maybe twice a year max. And the highlands are the population is, everywhere in Madagascar I found was very, very nice. They're very soft-spoken. They don't like confrontation, which is what I say is more Asian than African. Confrontation is seen as very, very bad. So you try to really solve arguments by basically saving face, by not accusing others or putting others in a situation that could damage their reputation or make them look bad in front of family and friends. What else? Amy, do you have? Let's see. Maybe I'll leave the floor to Amy so she can add things while I think of it.
Just a question. How long does it take to get to the beach?
So you have to drive. You have to take a plane. You can drive, but it's quite dangerous. And it will take you the whole day, more or less. So you have to take a plane, and in an hour you're there. In about an hour, you're anywhere in the north or the south or on both coasts. And the beaches are really beautiful.
But the climate must be great. Being 1,000 feet above, it must be just nice, not too hot, not too cold.
Yeah. So the climate in Tana is really the best I have ever experienced in my entire life, year round. Sorry, I just muted myself. So right now is the winter time. So winter starts from about mid-May to mid-September. And that means that it gets relatively cool at night. It gets I'm talking Celsius, between 5 and 10 Celsius at night, and about 20 during the day, which is not bad at all. The only disadvantage is that houses have no heating and they have no air conditioning. Most of them. Amy, for example, was in an apartment that had split air cons that would do heating also. But the majority of houses and apartments don't have that. That means that in the wintertime, it gets quite cold even during the day because the house can't heat up. It's been cold at night and it can't warm up even with 20-degree weather during the day. But I think it's a really minor discomfort. Madagascar is known for its cashmere. I'm wearing one right now. And they're quite cheap, and you can do your shopping there and stay warm in the winter months. In the summer months, so between October and May, it's really nice. It's not humid at all. The whole year round, it's not humid. It rains. It's the rainy season, but nothing like what you could experience, for example, in Panama, where I used to live before. So it's a very soft rainy season, and it usually rains at the end of the day in the late afternoon for maybe an hour or two. And the weather there, so during the day it'll be 30, and in the evenings it'll be 20 degrees Celsius. It's always sunny. Almost always sunny, bright blue sky. So it's really, really nice. I think that's a definite selling point for anyone, considering going to Madagascar.
Thank you. You've done a good job, Cecile. I'm ready to go.
Thank you.
Well, with the cashmere and the sun, I'm done. I'm on my way. And a special welcome to Robert too, who is from Madagascar. Or who says I'm Malagasy. So anyway, Robert, at the end we will have some questions for you too. So Amy, would you like to add more to what Cecile has to say?
Just a couple of things. I may need to agree with what Cecile said. In terms of climate, I don't personally miss living in Madagascar, but I miss the climate. Like, it's. I know last week we talked about the climate in Mozambique being perfect. It's not. In Madagascar, it is. It is absolutely the most extraordinary. I mean, you wake up every day with a smile on your face. It's so stunningly beautiful. It's just perfect. I think in 2 years that I lived there, I probably saw like 10 gray or rainy gray days. The beaches are the most extraordinary thing. Well, the beaches and the landscapes in general are just one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen in my life. It's just unbelievable. You can't compare it to anything. It's like another mini planet. I mean, it's something very special. A little bit on the city, as Cecile mentioned, it's very difficult to walk. This was something that I found I really struggled with. I also worked mainly from home there, and so kind of being stuck in your apartment and not really feeling comfortable going out, walking and relying on a driver all of the time it's quite overwhelming. I lived in an apartment in the center of the city, so I did actually walk a little bit. But it was extremely unpleasant, it was dangerous, it was polluted, as Cecile said, and foreigners there generally don't walk around, so if you do walk around, you are very obvious, and people don't hold back. Although Malagasy people are extremely polite, as Cecile said, extremely respectful. As a white woman walking around the center of the city, that's not the impression that you get. It's quite unpleasant to walk around. Although I never felt in danger, it was not a pleasant experience.
Amy, can both of you and Cecile mention it's not walk? People don't walk around. Now, why do people not walk? Is it because what's the reason? If the climate's so nice.
No, people do. There are hundreds of thousands of people walking, but they're walking in the road. They're walking in between the cars. The traffic is crazy. The pollution is crazy. And you're if you're trying to walk, you're walking in the road because the sidewalks, there's maybe like 2% of the city have sidewalks, if that. There's so many people. There's vendors on the side of the road. They're ducking under things, and there's stuff. There's people selling stuff all over the floor. It's hectic. It's really difficult to paint a picture, right, Cecile? Because the streets are it's just something else. I don't know how to explain it, but
yeah, I would say it's mostly also very dangerous, right, to walk in along the side of the road, and it's unhealthy for you because there's in the center of the city there is quite a bit of pollution. So there are a lot of old cars. They are still using deux chevaux, and so all of these cars from the 1950s in France are in Madagascar. So it gives a really beautiful sort of local color to the city, and it's very well known for having all of these old cars that have been sort of maintained, but it's not appropriate for an altitude city, and it's not appropriate just in general, even if we weren't in high altitude. So that means there's a lot of gas coming out and a lot of micro pollutants coming out of the cars.
Yeah, there's also the dry season is also that worsens the pollution situation, but you also have this issue of I don't know how you say in English, burning.
They burn firewood in the countryside. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I can't think how to say it in English.
It's like maybe is it like the kind of cultivation they do by burning the
slash and burn.
Slash and burn cultivation.
Yeah, so that during the dry season, you actually feel that in the city as well, coming in from the countryside. So it can be really smoggy. So on top of the kind of traffic pollution, you also have that. Just two more things very quickly. A lot of most expats live in houses not in the center of the city, so the traffic becomes a real issue. And in that sense, choosing where to live really depends on where you need to be every day, and whether that's a school or an office or whatever it has. That really has to be the main criteria in choosing where you live. And the last thing is the food. So the food is very heavily influenced by the French, obviously the French colonization. It's incredible. The restaurants, there aren't many, but there are some restaurants with some really fantastic food. Madagascar is famous for its foie gras, which is something that you may not expect. So yeah, it's not just the French influence, but also kind of fused a little bit with these Asian influences as well as the African. So it's a very interesting cuisine, and we were very lucky and very happy to enjoy that while we were there.
What more do I need? Cashmere, foie gras, good and the sunshine. This is getting better every minute, Amy. So tell us, what about housing then? The next question to you and Cecil. What suggestions and tips do you have? Because, housing is, all of you are veterans of relocation, that, taking housing can really, really upset your settling in process. And sometimes if you're not happy in your house, even the time that you are in that destination. So
yes, so I agree. So like Amy said, and it's I think that's the number one criteria is know where you want to be every day and find your housing next to that place. So in Amy and Thiago's case, it was easy since they were both working at the bank, and they found a great place close to the bank. Our case was a bit harder since our son was going to the French school, and it's really at the opposite direction of where the World Bank is. So we decided that since in DC, our son had really long travel times to go to the French school, we decided that it was his turn to have very short travel time, and we would take the brunt of having a longer travel time to work. And so we settled close to the school, which I think is an important option if you have kids. If you need to make that compromise, I would go for being closer to school, because that's also where his or her friends are going to be. You don't want to be in the center of the city and have the school be 45 minutes away, because then that means that if you organize play dates, it just becomes a little bit more complicated. And since you have a chauffeur anyway, I really didn't mind the traffic that much, except that, there were occasions, and we all know, everyone that's lived in China knows, a normal, A to B that normally takes, let's say, 25 minutes ends up taking 4 hours. And you don't expect it, and you don't know what's happening, but that's just the way it is. It happens maybe 2-3 times a year, and you just have to deal with it. The Christmas season, so starting December 1st, traffic gets really, really heavy, because a lot of the people that live in Tana are not actually from Tana. So they'll have their family from the outskirts or from outside of the city come in to celebrate the holidays with them, and then all the shopping that goes on and stuff like that. So traffic becomes really insanely heavy in December. And so that's something that the first December you live there, you're sort of, in shock by the amount of traffic. But, then it just becomes better. So I would say housing, yes, where you work and where your school is. In comparison to other places I've been and to what I'm seeing now in Dakar, because I've been in contact with real estate agents there, Tana, in relationship to how poor the country is, has an incredible offer of really nice, modern villas with pools and or apartments that are really up to U.S. standards. And it's not expensive. So obviously the World Bank has a rental allowance, which is for Tana, I think it's $1,400 per month. And just to give you a sense, we lived in a 5-bedroom, 3-bath villa with a huge garden and a pool. Just amazing, completely brand new, marble floor. It was just really, really modern and beautiful, and we pay 2,000 euros for it per month. The equivalent in DECA is at least $6,000 or $7,000. So that's what I have to say about housing in Ghana. It's great. You have a lot of choice. Prices are going up a little bit since in the past 3 years, but not that much. You have choice, and it's quite secure. You have, obviously, you need to have 24-hour security. It's mandatory. It's mandated by the World Bank anyway, and it's paid for by the World Bank. So there are 3 or 4 different security companies you can choose from, and they have guards that are there 24 hours a day with 8-hour shifts. Amy, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that's, yeah, no, I think one thing I would maybe add is Ghana is not a particularly green city. So that's something, although for me, it was really important to live in the center. That meant living in an apartment, and that meant not having a garden or we had a very nice terrace, but if you need proper outside space, living in the city is it's very difficult to find something with the kind of space that Cecile and her family had, which is really special. So again, it's really a trade-off. What else on housing? Yeah, prices are incredible. I mean, here we pay twice what we paid in Tana, but obviously the bank changes the allowances based on that. Yeah, no, I don't think anything else to add on housing. Maybe just one thing that, again, and we mentioned this last week as well, getting work done and depending on people to fix things and the quality of work can be a little bit taxing. But yeah, that's just, I think, something everybody has to get used to if you're going to be overseas.
We have a question in the chat box before we move on to what is it like to get work. I know both of you have consultancies with the bank, but the question in the chat box is, what are the medical facilities like? A quick question. What are the medical facilities like in Tana? So could we address that before talking about the work situation, please?
And if I may suggest, including also some experience, I know none of you are now in Tana, but or maybe Robert also can tell us about the COVID situation. How is it as of now in Antananarivo?
I know Cecile can speak much more for the COVID situation, but in terms of medical facilities, not good. We had a doctor that would come to our home if we had non-severe issues, and she would prescribe basically whatever you asked for, which was very convenient, but perhaps not very professional. Access to medication depends what you need. We didn't have any problems, but there are some things that you would struggle to get. Again, being an island, it's difficult importing things. I needed some care while I was there, and I had to go to South Africa, but much is the same as I would here. So, but Cecile can probably say more, especially with having a child.
Yeah, so I agree with you, Amy. In terms of medical facilities, you don't want to get seriously sick in Tana. Under normal circumstances, so non-COVID related circumstances, you have La Réunion, which is a French island an hour away by plane, and they have very good medical facilities. I went to La Réunion for checkups that couldn't be done in Tana because of medical equipment that they don't have. So they don't even have basic, it's hard to, for example, get a gynecology exam, get your yearly gynecology exam done. For eye doctor, that's fine. Pediatrician is okay, but any sort of kind of special condition that you could have, you need to get you need to make sure that you've got enough medical supplies with you or medicine that you need. And I think under COVID, it's caused a lot of stress. I have friends that were pregnant, very pregnant when COVID hit, and they immediately left because you don't generally expats. I know of one expat that had her baby in Tana. I have many Madagascar colleagues that have delivered their babies in Tana with absolutely no problem. But I think as an expat, I guess you don't want to take the risk, or you feel more comfortable with European, American style medical doctors, equipment, facilities. But like I said, I mean, it's definitely doable. Millions of women do it every year. So all in all, yes, the medical facilities are pretty weak in Tana and in Madagascar in general. And
sorry.
Ben, do you want to say anything? Do you want to add anything about your insights into medical facilities?
I mean, the last time, I left Madagascar in 2009, so so a lot of things changed since then. But I heard that there is a clinic that is pretty good over there. They call it Polyclinic. I don't know if you heard about it. I think it's one of the best in Madagascar. Of course, a lot of people prefer to go to South Africa or to La Réunion if they have some difficulties. But I think the Polyclinic, as I heard, is pretty good. So, in terms of the pollution, etc., of course, it's very polluted because Antananarivo is, is supposed to be for maybe 500,000 people, while I think right now we have more than 5 million people living there. So it's overcrowded because all the people from countryside try to get to the capital to try to find a job. Yeah, and that is also because of the priority of the politicians. Because I think Madagascar is a very huge country. It's bigger than France and the Belgium and the Netherlands together. And our strength is supposed to be the space. We have enough space for agriculture and other things, but instead of focusing on that, they're focused on something else and focus on putting all the money in their pockets. So that's the problem in Madagascar. So, and that's probably why it's dangerous to work, especially if you're a white woman, because a lot of people, especially because of the political crisis lately, a lot of people lost their job. While they don't want to leave the capital, they prefer to stay there. So there are a lot of insecurity right now. That's what I heard, and that's exactly why you need to have guard. You have to relationship with the police. So in case there is an attack in your house, you can call the police right away so they can intervene. So that's the issue right now. In terms of the COVID, just following what I see on the media. So they say that so far they have 9 or 10 deaths of the coronavirus in Madagascar, but they also said that they found the remedy. Well, that's what they call the COVID organic. That's a remedy that is Madagascar is trying to export in other countries in Africa. The government of Chad said that it's working well over there. I don't know if it's true or not. And some countries say that it's working pretty well. It helps to heal some of the sick people. I don't know. In Madagascar, they say that it's working pretty well too, except that if you have how do we say diabetes? If you have you cannot take it if you have
Diabetes.
issues, etc. While those who are the victims of the corona are especially those who have diabetes. So if you don't, you cannot drink the COVID organic while you have diabetes, then you'll die. So yeah, so far we have 9 deaths, I think, and the president said that they are able to maintain it. They are able to keep the Malagasy safe. I don't know why he's saying that the Malagasy is safe while the social distancing doesn't really exist, because they have this curfew from the beginning until 1 p.m., which means people are going to work until 1 p.m. And then now it's until 3 p.m. I don't know if it's still the same. I don't know. I didn't follow the news lately, but I don't know. It's not a real lockdown then. So people still get together, etc., etc. And which means if somebody is sick going to the office, staying there until 1 p.m., it's gonna spread the virus. So what's the purpose of the law, the curfew until 1 p.m. or until 3 p.m.? I'd rather open or close. You have to choose the one or the other.
Yes.
Sorry, Cecile, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what Robert was saying. So there are 1,400 cases confirmed of COVID and 12 or 13 deaths as of today. And lockdown is now, there's pretty much no more lockdown. So everything is sort of back to normal, except in the evenings where you can't go out. And the reason that confinement is really difficult in Madagascar and in Africa, I think in general, because people really live day to day and really need to get out and earn their money. If they don't do that for a day or two, then they can't feed their families. So confinement was okay for 2 weeks, and even in the poor parts of the city, they were never confined because they just didn't have a choice. Also, all the agricultural products come from outside of the city, from the outskirts of the city, and confinement meant that they had shut down any to and fro from outside to the inside of the city and back. So agricultural products couldn't get into the city to feed all of these 5 million people Robert was talking about. And that became a huge problem very quickly. We felt it as soon as they locked down, as soon as we were in lockdown, people just went crazy in the supermarkets. I've heard it was the same thing in France, in the US, and and the fact that we're an island really exacerbated this problem. So there were many things that we couldn't find for, a few weeks to a month. And then things went back to normal, but they also went back to normal because we deconfined pretty quickly, or they relaxed part of these laws, part of these laws that they had put in place in order for people to be able to move around, to deliver their products and earn a living. Yeah, that's all I have to say about COVID right now.
I would like to take the opportunity, Yvonne. I see that Portia, who is our incoming champion in Madagascar. I hope, Portia, you can hear you. You can hear us, sorry. And if you want to add something in the discussion, please. Portia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Let's
yes,
see.
We can, Portia.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you. So I was just going to say a couple things about COVID. I'm still here. My family, we're few of the World Bank and few on the American side that have remained. But I do think that in terms of the lockdown, one of the things that the president did do that I think really helped is he cut off the taxi days, which are like the vans or the public transportation. At first, and they were not moving for quite a while. And then when he implemented them, everyone who's on there has to wear a mask. And, we hail from the U.S., and I will say that it's amazing here, the number of people who use masks. And I'm not even being facetious, but even the homeless people, the ones who live on the street and who come up to you for money, have masks. And in the U.S., I know that everyone is not really using masks, and people go out. And so that is actually, in and of itself, I think something that's just amazing how serious people are taking the situation here, as opposed to what I've felt has been happening in other countries. And so that, to me, seems very responsible of the country in general and of the population. And I do think, as Cecile said, Africa, in and of the entire continent, but particularly Madagascar, you can't have the isolation practices don't work in the same way they do for the U.S., and you don't have that social safety net to, help people or help the places that only get their money from working in homes or working on the street and stuff like that. And so if the people and the population in the country is going to survive, they have to make realistic plans that make sense for the country. And I think that so far that's what they've been doing. And we've seen, in Tamatave, actually quite an explosion of cases, but here in Tana, the number has remained relatively small. They did have, I think, 15 new cases last night. But the other thing that we are pretty amazed about that the government has been doing here is contact cases. They really have been tracking in a very efficient way the number of contact cases. And so I think that's another strong point on behalf of the government and what they're doing here in Madagascar.
Thank you. So can we switch from COVID to careers? It's quite a jump from COVID to careers, but our spouses are always interested in what is it like, is it easy to get a work permit? What are work opportunities? I know Cecile and Amy both came with consultancies from the bank, but what happens if you don't have one of those? You're not fortunate enough to have a consultancy. What's the situation for spouses?
So I think it depends greatly on who you are as a person and what your skill set and experience is in. So when we moved here, I did not have a consultancy with the bank, but within 2 or 3 months after being here, I had one, and I'm still a consultant for the bank, but I also have now a full-time position at USAID. So I think there are a lot of international players, and if you're, depending on the type of visa you have with the World Bank, as a spouse, I have a visa that allows me to work. And so I know that the U.S. Embassy often posts positions that are kind of for spouses of diplomats or people who are already here who have the visa that we have, as well as the European Union. There are lots of different companies and organizations, and even if you're looking for work but not necessarily something that you feel like you need to earn a living off of or that you need to make money, there are lots of orphanages. I think that you can really find something for everyone if you have an interest. I have a lot of friends who've come here and they've started their own business selling soap. One opened a beauty salon. Another one is now a CrossFit trainer. So there's certainly opportunity, but I think it depends on who you are as a person. If you're willing to build your network and go out and meet people and do things. I think in the formal sector, it definitely is a benefit to have French as a language, which I didn't have before we came here. So I started learning French once I arrived. But if you are American, then in the American embassy, they don't prioritize French, unfortunately. So if you speak English, you're good. But yeah, I would say I have an education background. So my PhD is in education. So at first I actually started off just not volunteering, but substitute teaching at the American school. So there are lots of, I think, opportunities if you can tap into a network, and then people can very quickly introduce you or kind of show you around.
Cecile, I know you're about to go, so if you can and then we can go back to Portia and Amy on work before we move on to other questions that are coming in the chat. Do you have anything, words of advice about careers in Madagascar?
I completely agree with what Portia said, and I have many friends also who have started their own businesses. There's a lot of raw material in Madagascar, such as raffia, which you can make hats and bags out of. What else? Leather. A lot of raw materials that can be used to make very nice gems, precious stones that can be used to make things out of. So a lot of my friends have started businesses, social businesses, some of them were working with local artisans to produce products for the expat market. And that works really well. And then, I have another part of my group of friends that are in international organizations, like Portia said, they're pretty much all there in one way or another. So if that's what you're looking for, then there's definitely opportunities. And
there are no work permit issues, right? So that really helps.
I work at the bank, but so I don't know. But apparently, Portia didn't have any problems. And then I'm in the private sector, and I don't think it's an issue if you're on a G4, or what kind of visa you would have with if your spouse is at the World Bank. But I don't think that's an issue. And the private sector is small but pretty vibrant. So if that's your thing, there's also a lot that you can do.
That's
I actually
really good.
Going back to the private sector. Yeah, no, I mean, there's the options are there. Obviously, like Portia said, having your network and building your network is kind of key. It's not too difficult, but it's important to have that in order to access the right jobs, because there are no sort of job forums or job websites available. So it's really through word of mouth.
Okay. That is really good to hear. It's not often that there's a brighter landscape for accompanying spouses. Usually, you can't even volunteer. So that is fantastic. Amy or Portia, do you have anything else before I go back to the remainder questions in the chat?
And before you start, Cecile, thank you so very much. Very useful. All the best for you. And Dakar is waiting for you.
Yeah, I hope we have a Dakar meeting. That way I can participate.
Absolutely. We will try. Laurent, on you, okay?
Okay, thanks everyone. And don't hesitate to email if you have any other questions.
Many thanks.
Thank you, Cecile. It was very, very informative. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Okay.
Before leaving Madagascar, try to go to Lucy Bay or Sainte Marie or in the deep south. This is where you'll find all the beauties of Madagascar.
Oh, I've been out to all those places already, and hope to go back again. Okay. Take care, everyone.
So before Amy or Portia, would you like to add anything more about that spouses must know about their careers? Otherwise, I would like to return to the chat box where we have several questions.
Very quickly.
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Amy.
No, go ahead, you go.
I would just say that a lot of the international organizations do post their in-country jobs on their website. So the U.S. Embassy posts positions at the embassy and at USAID, which is who I work for. JICA would post things. UNICEF would post things. And so I think it's just incumbent of you of searching to see what's out there, because it's not always through word of mouth that you don't know everybody. And I would say if you don't have, so for me, my network really grew because of the school network. My kids are school age, and so I met other parents, and that's how my friendship circle got, I'd say, expanded exponentially. But if you don't have kids, then I think you will have to think more strategically about how to tie into the larger group of people or figure out some ways so that you can very quickly get to know people and get to kind of know what's going on. And some ways of doing that might be like joining one of the gyms or signing up for some of the classes, things that you like to do. If it's tennis, if it's squash, whatever it is, do it because you'll start to meet people that way, and that will expand your network.
Amy, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think, two things. One, French is pretty much necessary. It's very difficult to find anything without. And the other was kind of the expat community kind of inevitably conglomerates and socializes together. So you often do end up meeting, especially for your spouse, who maybe has more of an established network than you do when you first move. You do kind of inevitably end up meeting people from, the EU, the United Nations, the other UN organizations, USAID, as Portia was saying. You do kind of end up moving in those circles, and in that way you also hear about things. But the international organizations are pretty good amongst themselves at sharing vacancies. So often, the UN, would share vacancies with the World Bank office, and the office would circulate them among the staff. And if your staff is, keeping an eye out, they can share things with you. And so, yeah, there are ways finding things.
So what I'm hearing is there's no central platform then. It's organization to organization, like you look at their website or they share it with your organization, right? There's no central platform where.
Keeping an eye out and looking around. So there's no kind of one place, one-stop shop.
So a very practical question here in the chat box for Amy and Portia is about the quality of food in the supermarket. How quality of food in general, and what are the supermarkets like?
I think my opinion, the supermarkets I find excellent. We were really surprised at what we could find. French products, European products, as well as Madagascar things. So in general, it's pretty good. One thing you do have to be careful with is that other nations will sell their outdated products to Madagascar. So there were many instances where you would pick something up in the supermarket and it was actually totally out of date or they've scrubbed the date off it, or simply not put one. So you do have to be a little bit careful, but generally, there are kind of 3 or 4 big supermarkets that you can generally trust and didn't really have any issues. Eating out, you do have to be careful. I've never been so unwell in my life. It takes some getting used to. I don't know if Portia you had the same experience, but I suffered a lot in the first few months. It does take some getting used to, even if you go to what you think is the cleanest, nicest, most expensive, fanciest restaurant. You have to be careful. But generally, excellent produce, excellent. A lot of things you can buy in the street. You have to be careful about washing things, obviously. Don't know much about pesticides and things like that. But if you can, it's quite easy to kind of establish contacts with people who grow organic produce and they can deliver to you and things like that. They're pretty good options.
Yeah, I would agree with Amy. There are some huge chains here. ShopRite, which is from South Africa, and Leader Price, which is a European, and then they have Jumbo, and so you can find even things. I have a friend whose son has a gluten allergy, and so now there are lots of gluten-free options as well. So I think it's relatively easy to find things. There will always be something that you can't find or that just isn't here, but you might be able to find a close second. I think in terms of fruits and vegetables, I've had really good luck, really good with fresh fish. Honestly, I get really good fresh fish. I pay an arm and a leg for salmon, but it's fine. I know that that's what I'm going to have to do. And then, I second what Amy says about washing the fruits and vegetables. And so there is like a fruit and vegetable wash that you use, and you just, put the vegetables in that for a few minutes and then rinse it with water. And you definitely want to have some sort of filtered water in your house. You can't drink the water here, faucet water. So something else just to know.
Okay, thank you. And then another one on activities before we move on to the more complex questions so we have 3 more questions. So in the interest of time, how do your family spend free time? Spend your free time. Are there any interesting activities?
So I think it depends on what your interests are, but I do think that there is a lot of stuff here for everybody. Like we just recently found a paintball place, which my kids are a little bit too young for, and they have like a zip line thing. Typically, I'd say that because I have small kids, ages 5 and 4, we spend our time with other families who have small kids. And so then we do things like, go swimming or horseback riding or things like that. They don't have bowling, that's not here. I think people have pools in their houses, or you have a pool table, and, there aren't a lot of open spaces there are a lot of spaces to do great walks and great trails and to bike, but there aren't like public playgrounds. If you're looking for something like that, that doesn't really exist. I think if you're single or young or not even single or young, but you like to go out and dance, there's certainly a lot of nice clubs to go to. I think it just depends on people's interests, but there's enough variety for it to be an island. I mean, we're never bored.
Amy, do you have anything to add? Otherwise, we'll move to the next question.
No, let's move on. I need to leave in about 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. So we have a question coming of how do you think LGBT couples or families would be received in Tonga?
That's a really good question. So Madagascar is a predominantly Catholic country, Christian Catholic country. It's hard. It's difficult, you know. I mean, my husband and I, we have a friend in Tana who suffered a lot because, and a Malagasy friend who suffered a lot because it wasn't appropriate for him to be open with his family, and until today, his mother is insisting on, you know, him introducing him to lovely women that he should marry and things. It's difficult. It's not a very. It's interesting because actually, in some ways, it's a really open-minded country in terms of sexual relationships and things. It's quite surprising in some ways, but well, there's some very interesting stories I can tell, but maybe offline. But yeah, it's not widely accepted. But again, it depends what circles you move in as well. I mean, if you're, you know, spending lots of time with, and Robert probably has much more insights on this.
Yes, I was going to say, Robert, what did you think? What's your take on it?
I mean, as Amy said, it's we are majority Catholic over there and pretty conservative. So I know that it changed a lot since, if you compare what happened in the 10 years ago, compared with right now, the LGBT community start coming out, and we have no choice. We have to accept it. We have even friends. We have a couple of friends that are gay. I would say that 10 years ago, I would say I don't want to be friends with those people, to be honest, to tell you the truth. But now, the things changed. We invite them in family events, etc., etc. And I think it's changing. It goes step by step, but I think it's changing. We have no choice in we have to accept it. But in the countryside, it's more difficult compared that in the capital in Tananarivo. It's easier to be accepted in Tananarivo compared to the other regions, yeah, which are more conservative.
So the last two questions. We have question on corruption. Let me get this. What's the level of corruption, and does it have an impact on everyday life or administrative purposes?
As a Malagasy, I would say the level of corruption is very high. Yeah, unfortunately, it's very high, and there are a lot of work to be done on that. And I think the president is trying to do something, but yeah, we'll see what's going to happen. Yeah, but it's very high.
Last question.
But is it just a second, even? Is it, Amy and Portia, for instance, is it interfering in your daily life, or at least when you arrive, you need to give a little, bribe to get this, to get that, to get a driver's license or whatever, or it's at the government level?
I didn't really feel it on a personal kind of day-to-day level. The worst, I think, that we would experience would be maybe that before we had a car with green plates, that the police would stop you, basically because you're white and ask for money. But I don't recall having any particular experiences. I don't know about you, Portia.
No, for me, it definitely, I think more at a government level. I'm sorry, I don't have my picture on, but I'm a Black American, so honestly, everyone here thinks I'm Malagasy anyway. I really don't have any problems of anybody asking me for money, not even the kids on the street. They think I'm the nanny of my own kids. So and I think a lot of the international organizations are working at the levels that they can to help eliminate or greatly reduce the corruption that does exist.
I have a question now. I'd like to see what it is from both sides. Earlier, I think Cecile said that the Malagasy people are more Asian and in face saving and not liking conflict. But we all know that life doesn't go smoothly day to day. Even in the practical day to day issues, say with household help. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything complex or with our host country nationals in the office. What's the best way to deal with conflict, Robert?
In Madagascar, we really like to talk about what we call marmartirajana, which is we always try to find the consensus, the happy medium when you have an issue. So I would say it's always we're trying to find a win-win or a lose-lose situation. So if there is an issue, we always call the Rayamandren, which are the wise or the old people, to come to do some arbitrage and try to calm down the situation. That was always the case. Even in a political issue, that's why we always call the head of the church, etc., to come to try to calm down the situation. And that's from the higher level to the bottom level. It's always like that, always trying to find the happy medium.
So, Robert, what happens if you have household help and they say, don't clean your house the way you want it, or something went wrong in the house? How is there a win-win in that situation?
Most of the time, those household help, for example, comes from your countryside, or it's comes from somebody that you know who recommended that person. So instead of trying to attack directly the person who is not doing his job, you'll contact the person who recommended it to you first and say, hey, why did you recommend this lazy person to me, etc. You see, so that person will contact the person that he recommended. Yeah, so that's
a very interesting point, because something that we came across in Madagascar, that nobody was willing to recommend anybody else for anything, because it was a huge responsibility to recommend somebody, even if it was something very small. Oh, but I don't want the responsibility just in case something goes wrong. So it's really, really interesting that you said
because if you sponsor someone, then you'll be the responsible one that person does something wrong. Yeah. So talking about the origin of people from Madagascar, I know that in Antananarivo, which is the capital, there are more Asians. But when you go to some regions, people have more darker skins. When you go to Diego, for example, they have a darker skins. They are more Africans. I'm from the southeast of Madagascar, from Manakara, Wipen, etc. We have Arabs ascendants. So we are Arabs mixed with Chinese, etc. So Madagascar is a very how do they say, a very mixed population, and that's why you have French food, you have Chinese food, you have Indian food. Everything is mixed, and the mixture of that is the Malagasy food.
Amy, before you leave, thank you so very much. Gatinha.
Thank you, everybody. It's really
Stay
nice
safe in Mozambique, and hopefully we can have a churrasco soon.
Oh, I hope so. And nice to meet you, Robert.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank
Feel
you
free
so
if you
much,
have any
Amy.
question, if you have any issue with your household.
Oh, you can now be the consultant for household help sitting in Washington. That's brilliant. Portia, what is your experience, or maybe you want to be the first one to get the Robert's advice? How has your experience been with conflict?
I generally agree that people are non-confrontational, especially not in an aggressive way. I did have somebody that I had to fire. Um, my husband recommended him, so you're right in that sense, Robert. I went to my husband and I was like, why did you choose this one? He's crazy. But before it got to, and I'll just tell you, it was the worst of worst. I had a driver. We had one that we loved, but he was younger and a photographer, and he wasn't available every day. And because when I arrived, I didn't speak French. So very quickly, my husband met a taxi driver outside of the World Bank who spoke a little bit of English, and so Eric thought that might be a good fit. But he really drove like a taxi, and he was, I came in one day and he was taking a nap on my kitchen floor. He had taken a shower in my guest room. He had asked if he could bring his wife and kids to my pool on the weekend. So this was just not, and he once even suggested that I had my son from the police on the floor of the car because he stuck a garbage can that was too big in the car and had to take out my son's car seat. Anyway, so I had to let him go. And I felt bad because his wife was pregnant, but he actually, I just told him, before I let him go, I talked to Uli, who is kind of like the femme de menage. And to me, I said, Uli, really, you should manage everybody. And I asked her, I said, I don't understand. Is there a disconnect? And I tried to talk to him because I'm a teacher, right? These are learning moments. This is a teaching moment. I don't like when you arrive late for work because, and after so many times, I just said, I'm sorry, this isn't working for me. And we had just bought him a new motorcycle, so he actually owed us the equivalent of about $500. I said, you can keep the $500 and we'll just call that your severance pay, and please don't show up tomorrow. And that was kind of how we ended it. And I do feel that my friends here, I have a friend who just let somebody go at her house, and it's like coronavirus times, and she gave her 3 months salary, and then was like, it doesn't work. So I feel like people know that people are kind of living hand to mouth, and so usually you give 1 month or something and let them know that it's not going to work. And that's a win-win. I mean, they get 2 months salary and time to look for a new job.
Well, thank you, Portia. We're at 9:18, and there's one more question, just one last question in the box. So I will do that, and then I'll ask Padmini, our president, to wrap up today's discussion. And I will say thank you to Robert and Portia for really making this such an interesting time. I am ready to move to Tana. So it really sounds fun, actually. So what are general tips for safety and security? That's the last question.
I would say the same tip that you have in New York or DC or, London, any big city. So number one, be careful who you allow in your house. Limit the amount of people you have in your house because you don't want things to walk away and you don't want to end up trying to play the game of who stole it. I would say get recommendations from other colleagues, and you have people who you can trust. And those people, treat your staff well. Like, I'll just say this, the private security that we have, they don't get paid very much. Their salary is about less than $200 per month, or even less. What do they get? 200,000 RER. So what's that, like $50, Robert? And so we doubled their salary. I basically pay my security guards what they get paid from their company. And I told them, you have the most important job. It's your job to take care of my family, and you're a part of my family. So why would I not, take care of you? And I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but I do think you really should treat the people who work for your family and with your family well. The living, the wages here are so low, and we all work at an organization that pays so well. It would be nothing to come and double the wage of what people normally pay. Like, okay, people normally pay $400,000 per month, which again is like $150 for somebody who's working 10 hours a day. So we're going to give you $800,000 because we want to build a middle class as well, right? Now we're helping people pay their kids' school fees because your staff will ask you, they don't ask us because I think we pay them so much, but typically what happens is your staff asks you for a loan because they need to pay their kids' school fees, and then they get in the habit of working off the loan, and by the time they've paid you back the loan, they're asking for another loan. I say the biggest thing about staying secure is just limit who you have in your house, especially first until you know who you know, and then take care of your staff. That's my tip.
That's true. I second that.
Very much for a very informative session. And I think this is actually, for me anyway, I think it just makes relocation come alive. And I think it probably helps people who are thinking about where to go. That's my biased view. But I think it's been so helpful today. So thank you, Robert, for joining in and giving us the Malagasy point of view. It really has been so helpful. And Portia, and of course, in absentia, Cecile and Amy. So over to you, Pamini.
Thank you, Yvonne. Actually, Yvonne has already thanked all the speakers, but I would like to add my thanks to the ones who have left, Amy and Cecile, and of course, Portia and Robert. And Portia, I really, really thank you for your refreshing point of view and approach, and the empathy. And I feel like you are such a good ambassador for the World Bank as a spouse to go into Tana and with this refreshing attitude. I also felt listening to Robert that given the low number of deaths due to COVID and the few cases, in fact, if anything, right now is a great time to go to Madagascar, because here, as you know, in the United States, we have over 100,000 deaths already and no sign of abating. People are not serious about wearing masks. In fact, it seems as if in Madagascar, people are very serious about controlling the disease. I was also very interested to hear about the remedy that they seem to have found. Maybe it's some sort of combination of natural herbs, which would be so good to have over here in America. But
Can you bring in the tea for us?
I'm in the US, just to remind you. So I can try to ask people to bring some, but right now Madagascar is still on the lockdown. It's still closed right now. Nobody can go. Nobody can go out. Yeah.
Which is probably why the disease is under control as well. Well, having said all that and adding my thoughts, I think this was a wonderful event, and more than it was, of course, a great presentation from the speakers. But I also like to thank all the attendees, because when we have a good response, it encourages us, it encourages the speakers. So we really hope to see you again the next time when we visit Mozambique. Is that right? Or
Islamabad with Bushra and Sadat.
Sorry.
Next week, Islamabad.
We are really looking forward to it, Bushra and Sadat. And we hope that all of the ones who have attended today will join us again. So having said all that, thank you everybody. Thank you so much.
Can I add just one thing for the LGBT question? Sorry.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just reflected, and I do want to say this. If you're coming and you're already in a spouse, you're in a relationship, I think you will be fine. I don't want to discourage any LGBTQ members of the community from coming to Madagascar, because number one, you're already viewed as an outsider. And number two, I don't feel like Malagasy people impose their views on you. I think the opinions are really more geared towards those people who are already Malagasy. And there are some like gay clubs and things like that, because I think if you're single, it would be hard if you're coming and like looking for a relationship. That part would be more difficult. But if you're coming in a relationship, I would say, please come. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you, Portia.
Yeah.
And thank you, Robert, for giving
the Malagasy people, they mind their own business, so they don't want to to mind other people's business. So when I said that we are pretty conservative, I was talking about the Malagasy, petit Malagasy. Yeah.
Thank you again.
In Singapore, the conservative is also conservative like Madagascar, and it's still not acceptable. So what happens is the people who are gay, they make their lives outside of Singapore because it's still not acceptable. so they don't come back to live on a permanent basis. It's pretty drastic.
Thank you, then.
Shall we say bye on that note?
Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Bye, bye.
Robert?
Bye.
Hi, Robert. Robert? Just a question.
He left. He already left.
He left. Okay.
R. Marson at World Bank.
Okay, I will send a message.
He's working with us on the HR. He's in the visa office. Very knowledgeable about work authorization, visa, etc. Okay.
Because I don't know if you remember, we have a Madagascar in WBFN 5 or 6 years ago in Washington with me. And you don't remember, Kat?